Okay, 10:31, 17. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Good morning. Mhm.
Good
Hi,
morning.
Christy. How you doing?
Good morning.
Okay, Wendell. How you doing?
Very good.
How you doing? All right.
Good morning, everyone.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Okay. Uh, and pushing and oh wow. Okay. Good to see so many people. And Elizabeth, good to see you. Cushion, Dan. Okay. Karen. Wow. Amy, okay. All right. Well, excuse me, 1 second. I forgot. Excuse me. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, I'm back. Um, could you bring them down, please? Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning, good morning. I was just looking, excuse me. Dudley, do you have the papers?
There was no paper in the printer.
Uh,
There was no paper in the printer when he printed.
uh,
There was no paper in the printer.
Morning, everybody. Nice to see you all.
Good to be here.
Mr. Miller is with us. It's going to be a great program today.
Okay.
Hope everybody's having a great week.
Was that what's that?
Yeah.
Yeah, finally thawed out here in Boston.
Oh, yes, good.
There's one more coming. Okay,
All right.
hey, take your time. Okay.
I apologize. I had a problem with my printer this morning. Trying to print out something. Phew. Thank you. Well, good morning, everyone, again. And it's good to see everyone here. And we appreciate you being here and joining us, given the fact that I know all of you have other things to do in your life. My name is Dennis Lloyd, for those of you who I do not know. And along with my children and family, we're descendants of the enslaved individuals named Tony and Cuba Vassal, who were owned by the Vassal family, Vassal and royal families, members who endowed a family that endowed the first law professorship at Harvard, eventually became the Harvard Law School. The Lloyd family, along with affiliated members, established Slave Legacy History Coalition, which is an affiliation of organizations established to help connect the spokes on the legacy and history of slavery. As you know, there are a number of repositories and locations within the Boston and Cambridge community, where one can find information. So one of our purposes is to connect those links so that everyone will have easier access to information, and to also build bonds and have discussions. And similar to today, bring individuals to a forum that can discuss various segments of the legacy of slavery. Hopefully, yesterday, you had an opportunity to see the article in the Boston Globe, and which spoke to the uncovering of slave connection in Roxbury at the First Church of Roxbury. And it was done by a Harvard research fellow by the name of Abib Allah, and he worked under the direction and with the Reverend Mary Margaret Earl, who was the rector of the First Church of Roxbury. Hopefully we'll have them speak at a future Slave Legacy History Coalition meeting. Interestingly enough, how information is located and disseminated within the Boston community. We own a house diagonally across from the First Church of Roxbury, where my children grew up, and a brownstone there, which we've had for years, and I never knew this history. So this was quite interesting for us. So we're looking forward to hearing more about what was uncovered at the First Church of Roxbury. For those of you who are interested, we do have some links connected to our newsletter, and one of them will take you to a site where our speaker for January, Nick Tabor, the author of Africa Town, where his book is available. And we're going to encourage you to link onto it and to purchase a book, Nick's book. Now, for those of you who were not on our January meeting, Nick made a wonderful presentation. And Africa Town speaks to a situation where a ship, the last slave ship carrying slaves from Africa, came up a river in near Mobile, Alabama, and where the ship sunk. At that point, the slaves who were on the captured enslaved people escaped, and they founded a town called Africa Town, which is still in existence today. So the book traces that history, and it's something that I'm sure all of you would enjoy reading. So it's located on our website, and we would encourage you to go and to purchase a copy if you choose to. So it's not only on today's newsletter, but our website, which is www.slavelegacyhistory.org. Other good news, the Cambridge branch of the NAACP Jum Major for Justice Award will be presented to no other than our very good friend and affiliate member, Dan Smith, who is the pastor of the First Church in Cambridge. For those of you who know Reverend Dan, he's a wonderful person who has worked hard and dedicated his ministry to fighting for justice on behalf of the underserved and of all people. I know Reverend Dan. My daughter Egypt has worked on the social justice projects with the First Church of Cambridge and members of the First Church. So we congratulate Dan, we congratulate the NAACP. It will be a wonderful event, and Congresswoman, U.S. Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley will be the keynote speaker. If you go down our website and also on our newsletter, you can click on and find out additional information about the event, which will take place this coming Saturday, I believe. And so we're encouraging you to go and to see if tickets are available, and you would like to purchase them and support Dan. Congratulations, Dan. Congratulations to you. A couple other shout outs before I introduce our speaker for today, and that is to, again, to Marieke Van Dam and the History Cambridge, and all the support that they have given us. She's done a wonderful job. She supports us behind the scenes, does a number of things that help support our weekly and monthly project here with the Slave Legacy History Coalition. So thank you very, very much, Marieke. Also, I'd like to highlight Hidden Brookline Tours, which will be conducted by our good friend and affiliated member, Dr. Barbara Brown. Barbara conducts tours 3 times a year, I believe it is. And the next tour is scheduled for March 25th, and it will be from 1 to 2:30. This free tour will visit 3 sites which has a connection to slavery and will tell the story of freedom, Underground Railroad, and other hidden gems that are in Brookline, which most people, I'm sure, do not know. So you can find additional information on our website, again, www.slavelegacyhistorycoalition.org, or by going to hiddenbrookline.weebly.com. And again, that information will be posted on our website. And finally, before I introduce our speaker, I'd like to give a very, very special shout out to the Longfellow House, who recently received a grant. And included in that grant was a position for an intern, which will be dedicated to assist the Slave Legacy Coalition. And we're very thankful for that because, as many of you may know, this is basically a 2-person operation. My daughter Egypt and myself. And if truth be told, if anything happens to my daughter Egypt, she said, well, I really got a problem. So could use the help very much. And so we appreciate the Longfellow's support, and with this intern, which that person will be coming on in the near future. So we look forward to. So we look forward.
Can I give a tiny plug to the internship application?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Thank you so much. I just put a link to the chat. So if anybody knows any current or recent graduates, it is an internship with the National Park Service to support the Slave Legacy History Coalition in partnership with the National Council on Preservation Education. So just click the link. It is a paid internship. It includes an hourly wage in addition to a monthly housing stipend. So please distribute this far and wide. Applications are open through the 22nd. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much for that, Emily. If you include it in our, again, newsletter, if you scroll down, you will see a link to the information which Emily is speaking about, and also on our website again. So we greatly appreciate it. Could use the help, no doubt. my wife helps me. I don't want to get into trouble, but she has her other project, and she will be heading up our new children's project in a short while once we roll that out, and once we're in a better position to do it. Also, and certainly my other children, one daughter's in California, so her time schedule is different. So we appreciate everything that everyone has done to help support us, to get us this far. And one last little plug, down at the bottom of our newsletter and also on our website, you will see a little opportunity there to donate. If you clicked on the link, if you can click it on, you can make a donation to the Slave Legacy History Coalition. Now, we have a conduit, which is for a fiscal agent who is at this current time supporting us, and that is through History Cambridge. So you will receive a 501c3 notice of your contribution. But again, if you go down to the bottom of our newsletter, you can click on the donations, and you will see, give you an opportunity to make a donation. Today's speaker, Mr. Melvin B. Miller, who I have known this young man since I had hair. So I'll put it that way. Mel is from Roxbury, and as my family is, born and raised in Roxbury, and Mel has a very, very, stellar history. In addition to being the founder of the Bay State Banner, which I believe is the oldest, certainly the oldest African-American newspaper in Boston, and also possibly in Massachusetts. So I greatly have admired him over the years as the Banner comes out weekly. Mel is a native of Boston. He's been actively involved in politics and public affairs for more than 50 years. And in 1965, he founded the Bay State Banner, a weekly newspaper advocating the interests of Greater Boston's African-American community. Mel has served as a publisher and editor ever since its inception. Prior to establishing the Banner, Mel was an assistant United States attorney for the District of Massachusetts. In 1973, the State Banking Commission appointed him as a conservator for the Unity Bank and Trust, Boston's first minority bank. And under his stewardship, the bank's operation became profitable for the first time in 1977. The mayor of Boston appointed him as one of the 3 original commissioners of the Boston Water and Sewer Commission. He later became chairman of the Boston Water Commission in 1980 and managed the operations budget of $193 million. Mel is also a founding partner in the law firm of Finch, Miller and Truce, a primarily cooperative law firm that was engaged in the practice of law from 1981 to 1991. He's also vice president and general counsel of WHDH-TV, Boston CBS affiliate from 1982 to 1993. A longtime trustee of Boston University, Mel became a trustee emeritus of the Board of Trustees in 2005. He is a member of a 3-member National Advisory Council of American companies doing business in South Africa under the Sullivan Principles until the council was disbanded after the demise of apartheid. He formerly served as the director of the United States South African Leadership Exchange. Miller has also served as a trustee of the Huntington Theater Company and director of One United Bank, the largest African-American owned bank and operated in the United States. He was also a director of a politically nonprofit think tank that researched public policy issues in Massachusetts. Mel is also a graduate of Boston Latin, Harvard University, and Columbia Law School. So I am very, very pleased this morning, very honored to welcome my good friend and certainly a very distinguished individual, Mr. Melvin B. Miller. Mel, you're on. So now we just, good morning. Now.
Muted, huh?
Okay. Mel, where did he go? Oh, gee.
He might be muted. I see him there.
He's muted.
Yeah, he's muted. No.
No, yeah, unmute yourself. Mel.
Just give him.
Okay.
See.
You have to unmute yourself.
I'll give him a quick call. Hold on, just.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry. Mel is, good morning, Dr. Harris Gibson. How are you doing? Good to see you.
No, did you click on it? You should be okay.
Yeah.
He's okay.
Okay. See, I don't do well with this technological stuff.
You're okay now? You can hear?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yep, we can hear you now, Mel.
Oh, okay. Well, you know, to tell you the truth, I hate all of this electronic crap. I like to talk to people face to face, and I think we're in the process of destroying the intimacy of our culture with it. But we'll do it because it's there, and it does make it easier in some way. After all, Dennis, you're in Atlanta, right? So, and I'm in Roxbury, so we wouldn't be able to do this at all without the technology. So I shouldn't be so critical. And I want to thank you for inviting me. I think what you're trying to do is very significant. Any history of a period of time of Blacks should be cultivated and well-known, and we should try to learn the significance of it, how it will help our future and our step forward. As you probably have learned from Dennis Lloyd, that I'm a journalist at heart, and journalism, as they say, is the first draft of history. So I'm going to try to give you some information about Roxbury, which will not otherwise be known. Dennis knows I'm a committed Roxbury man, a perennial Black Yankee. Now that might seem casual, but you know, Black Yankees are not like Mississippians or people from Alabama. It's a different culture. And some people want to say, oh, but that's like going to Europe and saying everybody's a Frenchman or everybody is a German. People would think you're crazy, but we do it all the time here, and it's supposed to be okay. But that's all right. So I'm primarily concerned with the consequences of the development of the Black culture after slavery was outlawed in Massachusetts in 1783. And the impact there is really significant. As a journalist, I've been very angry over the years that other publications seem to have nothing beneficial to say about Blacks, except about somebody who somehow lived an extraordinary life and was able to overcome all kinds of adversity, and they have to be a Superman or a Superwoman. But there are a whole lot of people who have done extraordinary things without a lot of publicity. I decided after years and years of this that I was tired of it, so I wrote a book. And I'm not trying to sell books. I'm going to hold it out. I don't know whether you can see it. Boston's Banner Years, 1965 to 2015, a saga of Black success. And the
Nope, he muted himself again.
I think you muted yourself again, Mel. Mel, can you hear me? I think you muted yourself again.
unmoved. How do I keep getting?
I don't know why. I don't know why that's.
How do I
happening.
keep getting moved? Well, somebody's wise enough to shut me up. That's that's really a very beneficial tendency. But anyway, the important thing to know is that I did not write the book myself. And I did that particularly because if you look now at the kinds of books that come out, you have people who are trying to find a way to become public figures. I don't think that's necessarily an evil thing to do, but that's part of the process. And I wanted to get away from that. I want people to be absolutely absorbed with the content without even thinking about me in any kind of way. Particularly if you thought about me, it might be negative and and it would not help easy acceptance of what the book wrote. So what I did is I hired competent journalists to write all of the various chapters in the book, but they had to write it from the model I gave them. That is that they had to write it from the perspective of what did Blacks do on their own? What did Blacks do, to get a good education? What did Blacks do in order to become politically significant? What did Blacks do in business and all of the other areas? And that, I think, gave us a very different perspective because it showed that Blacks themselves were trying to solve the problems. I think one of the weaknesses that we have coming out of slavery is that we've become too dependent on the master to somehow we're looking for help or support or something when there are lots of things that we can do ourselves. And I don't think we do all the things that we can do ourselves. And that's what I was very concerned about. So this whole thing is to overcome some of the loss of self-esteem that many Blacks have had because we are in an inferior position in this society. But there's an interesting twist on that. Blacks in my generation in Roxbury, generally speaking, they had a sense of superiority. They felt strong because the parents made them feel like smart. We could go to the public schools. We had opportunities to move forward. And as a consequence, we created a subculture in which Dennis participated of self-reliance and success that is not evident, in my opinion, everywhere. It's not part of the culture in a lot of other places. So in this book, I put down areas where Blacks have worked hard to make their own development. So Roxbury Blacks are the only Black group in the country at that time who are able to build a bona fide skyscraper. Most people don't think of that, and they don't think that it happened, and they don't think it's significant. But I don't know how many of you in Boston have noticed the State Street Bank building. The State Street Bank building was built by Blacks from Roxbury. Now nobody pays much attention to that because whatever Blacks do that's significant gets swept under the rug. And all you have to do is make a misstep and do something wrong and you get headlines. But so we also developed one United Bank, which became the largest Black-owned and managed bank in the country. This is out of a community that has a very small percentage of Blacks. We did that here. The other thing is one of the criticisms of Boston for Blacks has always been that you can always get a job if you knew how to handle a shovel and a mop. And so there was very little room to move upward. And Tom Brown established, who was a graduate of Brown University, an old graduate when there were very few Blacks going to the Ivy League schools. He established the Jobs Clearinghouse, and he ran a campaign that opened thousands of jobs in middle management. For the first time, Blacks could get jobs where they could sit behind a desk. And so that was a very important element. The other one that I think that I mention in the book, among other things, is that probably Roxbury is the only community I ever heard of in the United States that forced the federal government to change its foreign policy. And people say, when did that happen? Well, Black Polaroid employees decided that they would not support the Polaroid program that provided the identification cards that were used in South Africa that every African had to have one so he could easily be stopped and identified by the police. And then they started a major campaign to end apartheid. And the United States, I won't go into the details, but they certainly had to change their policy and allow that to happen. I have to tell you that I have to apologize because I need notes at my age. My memory doesn't work like it used to. And I look at all you young folks, I want to tell you in advance, it's coming. So you got to get prepared for it. But when you start talking about slavery, the first thing you want to know is what is the population that is allegedly enslaved, and who are they, and how they develop that way. And reading about the Boston area, I see so much disinformation, and to me that's really unacceptable. So let's look at the Black population as it developed in Roxbury, because that will give us an idea, from the basic idea of how it became the community it is today. In 1865, right after the Civil War, there were roughly 2,348 Blacks in Boston, 2,348. That was 2.8% of total population of Boston in 1865. Now, the percentage didn't change much between 1865 and 1940. Only 3.1% of the Blacks, only 3.1% of Boston's population was Black. And 10 years later, it had gone up to 5.3%. But there was another change that a lot of people began to see. And that is, well, Blacks in 1950 constituted only 5.3% of Boston's population. It was 25% of the population in Roxbury. That's when the Roxbury started becoming the Black site. For instance, if you were an old timer in Boston, somebody said the North End, they knew you're talking about Italians. Or if you said South Boston, you knew that you were talking about the Irish, because those were ethnic neighborhoods that had developed. And this is the first time that a Black ethnic neighborhood developed identifiable in Roxbury. Now, who were these people who came here? Where did they come from? And some were the people like Dennis is interested in, and those are descendants of the British colonial slaves. Some of them with those descendants. And another group were slaves who had run away from other areas in the United States to Canada and were now coming down to Boston. And there were also some, to remember, there were some Black loyalists who fought for England in the Revolutionary War and decided to come back. And another group that most people don't know anything about, but they're related to me, are the descendants of Jamaican Maroons who were sent to Nova Scotia in 1796, because the Maroons, I don't know how many of you are familiar with Jamaican population, but the Jamaica was established first by Spain, and then under Elizabeth I, when the Brits developed a strong navy, they decided to come and take over Jamaica. So the Spaniards knew they had to get the heck out, and they left a lot of people behind. And those people were called Maroons. They developed colonies which were quite independent. But at any rate, interestingly, slavery along that line ended about 1650, because that's roughly when the Spaniards had to leave. After that time, the Jamaicans who were left were independent and could go and develop villages along their own line. Another thing that's sort of important to pay attention is, an anthropologist will tell you that whenever you bring different groups of people together, what's eventually going to happen is intermarriage. It's going to happen. And so it's really important to note that when you look around, you wonder who are these people and how did intermarriage develop? And anybody who really knows the old, the tradition in Boston of the Brits who started coming here after 1630 and became the nation's founders. There's an old saying, Boston, dear Boston, the land of the bean and the cod, where the lodgers speak only to cabots and the cabots speak only to God, because the lodgers and cabots were the leading families at that time. But believe it or not, they're black cabots. And I was really surprised to find out that my nephew is a cabot. He appears to be black. Everybody would say he's black, but he's a cabot. And so like some people used to say, well, I'm part Indian or something else. But to say that you're a cabot would have been a sort of an extraordinary statement, because it's one of the leading Brahmin families. But what happened is his mother, who was black but is half a cabot through her mother, asked me to do some legal work for her, and I had to go to a cabot meeting to do some review on cabot, their estate. And sure enough, there it was, that they are mentioned in the trust. And I don't think you put somebody in the trust if you didn't recognize them. Interesting. The one thing that always struck me as being of some interest in New England is that, unlike sections of the South, New Englanders had greater freedom of movement. You wouldn't automatically, if you were interested in, if you had an interracial marriage or something, and in the South, you would be in serious trouble. You'd be off the invitation list. But here, everybody's, even the people in the top rungs have greater freedom than you might think. Then, of course, in addition to that, you have Jamaican Maroons. Now, on the other side, my grandfather was a Jamaican who went to sea, and he didn't have much of an experience of slavery, because I don't know how many of you are familiar with the old whaling institution in the United States, but it was the third largest business in Massachusetts in the mid 1800s. And it was interracial because it was highly dangerous. And so most of the people were going to get killed or injured. And so if there's somebody who could do the work, you'd be glad to have them come along, and that's that. So there are a lot of differences that are really hard to establish under a purely racial line. Now, I got so interested in all of this stuff about that I decided to get some work done on my own family history, and to show how bizarre this is. I hired a woman who is does this work professionally. She's very highly regarded, and so a couple of months later, she called back and said, and I got somebody who knew Canada, because a lot of my relatives are from Canada, and she called me back and said, "You won't believe this." And I said, "What?" She said, "We're cousins." So I said, "We're cousins," and sure enough, I can show we had cousins, because my great grandmother was an aunt of hers or something like that. So anyway, and it's a funny thing is that she being a Canadian didn't mind it at all. Her husband being a rock rib racist oriented guy was not too happy with it. So we had to stop communicating. And but recently I got an award from the Journalist Society, and I got a phone call. She said, "This is your cousin, just called it. Congratulations." Then she hung up the phone. That was the end of it. I guess I'll see her again sometime. So, you know, the point is that there are many, many ways that there has been connections, and I really wonder about how the problems that we have in this country can ultimately be resolved. And one of the things that it was important in Roxbury, I don't know whether it was significant in Dennis's family, but most middle-class Blacks did not accept the white concept of color, of being significant. My father said, listen, there is one human species and that's it. And it doesn't matter what a color a person is, it has absolutely no sensible significance. And so whenever you say something on color, he said, it's not color, it's the culture. And that's the important thing. And now I'll tell you another, a trait that's sort of different in this culture. And I found out how different it was when my sister got a job and went down to Texas. And she was surprised. She said, you know, people, they've divided categories up: white, black, and Mexican. And I said, geez, how do you do that? That's a pretty big group without, she said, yeah, they don't, up here, we don't talk about whites like whites. We might say somebody's an Irish or the Yankee or Italian or Jewish or something like that. We would say it without hostility, but the color wouldn't matter much. And we would find it absolutely disgraceful. One survey I did when doing my book, I looked at people in the prior generation to determine how they reacted to significance of color. And it was amazing to me that a number of people said one of the biggest shocks of their lives was to go down to Washington, D.C. and see Black people being concerned and critical of other people's color or their hair or anything that might be considered to be Negroid in appearance. And I found, you know, that, in my opinion, made a big difference, because people, it was not acceptable to be antagonistic or critical of somebody's color. That was not at all something that we could get by. If somebody was doing that, folks would say, well, move away from them. One of the things that did interest me when I was young is I had never seen an African. And I can remember I heard there's an African going to visit a friend of mine, and I was so excited when I was a young boy, and I went by in order to see this African, and his name was Richelieu Morris. And he looked just like the rest of us. So that was sort of a disappointment, because he was, as you know, the the country was important for developing rubber, and his family had rubber plantations. So I don't know what to make of that. So I've decided I'm going to do another book, and I'm going to do it. I'm going to do a book a little differently from the one I did here, and it's going to be my experiences growing up in Roxbury in the 40s and 50s. And in a sense, I should have done that before I did the other book. But the reason that I didn't do it is that I know that it's not going to be well accepted by a number of Blacks. I find it hard to understand some of the attitudes of Blacks. They seem to think that somehow suffering and grievance has to be in the forefront of the antagonism to get rights. And I just, I just don't feel that way. Growing up, because of the unusual situation in Boston, we had a different attitude. We did not grow up hating whites or Jews or anybody. I can remember fairly recently, well, not too recently because he's died, but I remember Norman Johnson. You probably remember him, Glenn, Dennis. He was Norman and his sister were pharmacists, and he became one of the first Black admirals in the Navy. I think he was the second Black admiral. And after he got out of the Navy, he became Dean of Students at Boston University. And so, we were friends. We grew up together in the same neighborhood. And so I asked him, so we were just chatting. And I said, gee, the attitude towards whites has gotten to be sort of different from when we were young. And he said, yeah, he said, I was married for quite a while before I realized my wife's father was white. And I said, he married into the Underwood family, the Underwoods. And I said, was Mr. Underwood white? Here I was. I mean, I was when we had this conversation, I think I was 70. I wasn't a young guy. And all that time, it never occurred to me that Mr. Underwood was white. It was just not something that would come up. It was a different kind of environment. And I know my experience has shown to me that we have not been able to create Black unity. And it's not the fault of Blacks per se. It's because we are not unified. We have many different cultures. And the fact of the matter is, some of the cultures are going to be in conflict, and some are going to be compatible. But it's very, very hard to develop the unification that would be necessary to create the kind of political front that would give us a very, very strong run. But one of the things that I do want everybody to understand is that growing up, we were somewhat aware of people who were great achievers among us. And that was an inspiring attitude. That created an inspiring attitude among us. I told you already that there are Blacks and sea captains in the whaling industry, including my own grandfather, and And another thing is, people would just tell us stuff as we would go along. It's not like you would sit in a class to learn Black history. Stuff would just come up and people would say, gee, I didn't know that. For instance, my father had 3 sons, all with different shoe size. So every year when he had to get shoes for school, we would go to Brockton, to the factories, to get shoes at the factory. And I used to think it was so clever of him, because I would see the same shoes in the retail stores for twice as much as what we'd pay for them. And so he'd buy 3 and get even a bigger discount. And at one of those trips, he told me about John Matzelinger, a black man who created the invention that established Boston as the shoe factory center of the world. And I met a guy who was connected to Boston University. I spent a lot of time being a trustee there. And he didn't know that Blacks had anything to do with the United Shoe Company. You know, one of the big buildings downtown was originally the headquarters of the United Shoe Company. And when other inventions came along, of course, they lost their dominance. And once I was trying to sell ads to the president, and he was reluctant. And I said, well, we created you, we'll take you down then. And he laughed. He had no idea that the original invention was from a Black guy. As they're just people around who knew stuff. For instance, I know about Lewis Latimer, who worked for Edison. And now a lot of people might never heard of who he is, but he invented a workable light bulb. Edison invented the electrical cord and the electrical system that would provide the electricity to the light bulb, but the light bulb that Edison would have used burnt out so fast that it was useless. So Latimer, and I don't know, you just wouldn't know that stuff. I mean, not everybody knew it, I guess, but there are people I knew. The thing about Lewis Latimer had a large family, and while he moved to New Jersey, he left uncles and cousins, and so there was always somebody around to tell you how great Uncle Lewis was. And so there were other things that, you know, Dr. Fuller, who was the leading source of Alzheimer's. There's a building now dedicated to him at Boston University Medical School. And so I knew about him because his grandson used to come and hang out with us and go to and party with us, because they lived in Framingham, and the Black population in Framingham was very slim. So, you know, the thing is, we had there were a lot of things around to make you have a sense in Roxbury that you weren't at the end of the road. And I bet you there's one thing you can almost always win a bet on, but there's no way to prove it. There was a man who was a friend of my father who built the largest restaurant in the greater Boston area at the time. It was called Chickland. It was out on Saugus. It's now, it went out of business a while. He died and it went out of business a long time ago. And I think it's one of the big main hardware stores now. The property has been converted to that. And I can remember when I was a young boy, my father would take us out to dinner at Chickland, and he was apparently a friend of my father. He'd come to the table and chat with us for a while when we were there. So the reason I say this is that despite the intention of making us look bedraggled and incompetent and unable to move forward, that wasn't the environment that I grew up in at all. So it's now the question is that I would like to do is to write about that, how we succeeded despite every evidence that we couldn't possibly do it. Now, one of the things I wanted to run by you guys, one of the things that really induced me to get excited here, because I wrote an editorial that was attacked in the Banner, and I'm going to read it to you, and then I'd like to hear comments about it. It was called An Insult to Black Boston. Reparations for Black Americans usually means restitution for damages done by slavery to them or their property. Therefore, when the Boston City Council voted unanimously last week to establish a task force to study reparations for Black Bostonians, they had to be concerned about something other than slavery. The Commonwealth of Massachusetts outlawed slavery in 1783, so the city of Boston has no liability for damages inflicted by slavery. Blacks have been very productive since 1783. It is insulting for anyone to assert that Blacks have been unable to move forward on their own over the past 239 years. What hostile power do antagonists think has successfully debilitated Blacks over those years? There has always been racial hostility, but the Civil Rights Act of 1964, outlawing racism in education, employment, and places of public accommodation, has impugned outright discrimination. Blacks have to be wary of those seeking public attention and support who stir up the oppositions without implementing a solution to the problems. Whether you like it or not, the Black community must be responsible for those allegedly acting on their behalf. Boston Blacks must not tolerate the insult that they are still impaired by the hostile infliction of slavery that ended 239 years ago. Now, I was wondering whether your organization, a lot of people attacked me on that, which is okay. I don't, I've been attacked all my life, so that doesn't bother me. But I think that if in the process of enslaving somebody, people have done something that was improper, anyone who, other than being a slaveholder, I think people who are owed something should go and get it. If they were held beyond the slave time or mistreated in a way that was offensive to British law that was in effect at the time. So I was wondering, I was hoping that somebody here would pick up, would want to challenge that a bit.
It's a very profound question, Mel. I'm sure people have insight on how they feel. As you alluded to, reparation means a lot of things to a lot of different people. And so how it's interpreted, and certainly in this generation that we're in, how one interprets that, it depends on clearly their culture, their upbringing, their family upbringing, and their exposure. I'm sure.
Let me tell you what I think the problem is.
Okay.
Yeah, is that I don't think that we've confronted this problem. That let's look at it outside of slavery. If a car ignores a stop sign and they come out and they strike a passenger who's properly in the walk and knocks the person down, if the person's knocked down but not damaged, then it seems to me that that it's if they're knocked down, then the driver would be responsible for cleaning the clothes that were dirty or replacing the clothes. If the person was physically hurt, then that's another story because they're physical damages. And to tell you the truth, I think that people who want to say how much they've been damaged by a situation, I look and say, well, what have you done? What did you do to avoid it? There are crazy people all around who are always going to do things. And somehow we find a lot of that to be the consequence of slavery. So I was just wondering, let me tell you, I think that people on both sides of that issue, but I sometimes worry about strategy. Over the years running the banner, I have found us make one mistake after a strategic mistake after another. And I think there has to be a time when we have to begin to think of how we're going to what remedy do we want to attain and how are we going to get there? And that's a serious problem. I think that is, I always have a hard time for having people explain that to me. I get the feeling, especially being a Black Yankee, I don't give a damn who likes me and who doesn't. Quite frankly, I've been pretty mild in lots of ways producing the banner because I knew that if I came up with stuff that was too assertive, too aggressive, then what would happen is that it would be counterproductive. It wouldn't work. I don't need to have people make me feel good or anything. I want to win. And what I don't see is I don't see strategies or how to define the goal and how to get there. And that's what bothers me. And that's why I wrote the editorial. For somebody to come up and say, you're all screwed up because your grandfather was a slave or something, to me, that's an insult. Now, you might not think it's an insult. That's your business. But I'm going to tell you, as far as I'm concerned, it's not an insult at all. I mean, it's not acceptable at all.
Can I comment on that? I think the jury is still out on reparations. And I think I understand the rationale that you used for your editorial. It's almost like, simplification. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Or if it wasn't your fault, why am I involved? With your reference to slavery being abolished in the 18th century for Boston. But I do think that, and I was years ago, and when they first started talking about reparations, I was like, well, no, because what'll happen is somebody will come up with a sum of money, they'll figure out a way to distribute it to the Black community, and then that would solve all the problems of 400 years. And you couldn't bring up the issue again because somebody would say, well, you all been paid for that, so I don't want to hear anything more about it. So, but I think my attitude about it has changed, and I'm still learning in that area. But as it goes with what little I know about the Boston effort to establish a committee to look into this, I see it almost as a part of Boston's history to lead. In the abolitionist time, you know, there were strong abolitionists here in the city of Boston. Boston became a mecca of you know, a place for Black people to be more free, for people fighting for Black rights, et cetera, during the issue of slavery. Yet we know there were strong incidences of slavery right here in Boston. But the abolitionist movement had a leadership position nationally, and kind of stepped out in front. And maybe this effort by the city, the commission that's being established, will at least frame the conversation, the larger conversation, hopefully nationally. We just don't know what that committee may come up with. They may come up with a conclusion much like your editorial comes up with, or they may come up with something that has some more far-reaching implications for other parts of the country and this whole conversation about reparations. So I wouldn't dismiss it outright, although I think like your editorial suggests that we approach it with some caution. But I do think it's a little premature to totally dismiss the idea, given that.
Well, yeah, I get it, but you know, the point is, I think the arguments have to be better made, because people, once you introduce lawyers into a situation, all of a sudden it sort of can get ugly. I will tell you another, for instance, when affirmative action was established, it seems a lot of people thought that affirmative action would entitle people to get jobs for which there was no strong indication that they were qualified to do the work. You know what I mean? So the question was how to make it work for us. And I would tell you, there are a couple of situations, several situations where I got involved and was able to work that affirmative action in a way that created actual jobs for people. They actually got the jobs when the situation was put together in a way that you can't get around it. The problem I have as a lawyer, one of the reasons, look at the problem that we're having now because of the January 6th prosecutions. One big problem is, the biggest problem that hardly ever got mentioned because people are not lawyers, is that it was a lot of lawyers knew that they couldn't put together a jury that would convict, because in a criminal case, one person says, "No, I'm not going there," and it's all over. And the lawyer who loses a couple of those cases has to change his profession. So there are lots of things, there are lots of factors that are not apparent, but for people who are sophisticated, they understand what the problem is and why you can't do it. So I don't mind doing anything but you got to show me some victories within a reasonable period of time. And it seems to me, you know, I know the congressman from Ohio, whose name escapes me, he died recently, who first put out the bill, but he never got support for it. It just stayed out there. Oh, it's okay. You can hang out there. And the point is, you got to find a way to make it work for you. And I think there is a tough situation because of Massachusetts ending slavery in 1783, whereas slavery was permissible under the Brits.
Huh?
And there were some people who violated the 1783. If you violated the 1783 rules, then of course you open yourself to action. But I'm not sure why the city of Boston would be responsible for what British colonialists did. And if I was a taxpayer and you're going to take my money to pay for British colonialist misbehavior that over which I had no control, I would not be happy with that one bit. So now you got to find a way to make me happy, and you can do whatever you want, but I think it's wonderful. I think the way you're doing it is really smart. I mean, you're embarrassing Harvard University. They always like to be, up front. This is Harvard. I'm an alum, so I've spent 4 years there, and I understand that. And so they're willing to come forward with something. But when I look at it when I look at things from a purely legalistic way as to how you're going to win, I'm interested in victory. How you get from A to Z, and I'm not interested in bloviated statements. So if somebody can show me something, how we're going to do that, that's fine. I had arguments with some folks after, when it's an interesting thing, after it was discovered that police were killing a whole lot of blacks, which is something we always knew. But when we discovered that they were killing more whites than they were killing blacks, people chose to ignore that as a relevant issue. I think that was a mistake. Now we see it's a mistake now that we have Memphis. So I'm just all I want is to make sure that I think that what you're doing is a good thing to bring to people's attention, but you got to make sure if there's going to be a campaign that you have a legal basis for it.
That's a good point, Mel. I'd like to open up, see if anyone has any questions, point, that they'd like to add, because you've contributed a lot today, for us to absorb. And, I knew there was a wealth of history that needed to be shared, with as many people as possible. And you have done an outstanding job, doing that. Yeah, you really have. Thank you very much for that. I'd like to open. Does anyone have any questions, concerning what Mel has put forth? And do we have any? I know.
I
would just tell you one of the problems I'm going to have in the future is that given my family orientation and the training of my parents, I really have a hard time deciding issues. I don't have any hostility. I don't have any innate hostilities towards whites, blacks, Asians, or anybody else. And so it seems there's some people who have innate hostilities for good reason. Well, I haven't had any reason to have these innate hostilities against Italian, Irishmen, or anybody else. So it gives me a certain amount of freedom. But I think that once I'm out of the banner, I'm looking for change. The banner, I probably will make more. My statements will probably be a bit more aggressive in a sense of the standing out on issues, because I don't have to worry about. I won't have to worry about changing the tone the Dana. There was a certain tone that we had to have. Boy, there were so many competitors that have come up and fallen over the years, didn't make it, and tell you the truth, it's very, very hard to work through in a Black community because there's so many different cultures. I mean, if you go by color, you'll get the wrong answer. If you go by what people think and what they do, what's important to them. I mean, you look at Cape Verdeans. They've been here a long time. They have different food, they have a different language, and a different religion. I mean, how many more differences can you have? We've never had any wars with Cape Verdeans, but I can tell you sometimes there's some Cape Verdeans who would not think the same way I would think on a number of issues.
Can I make a comment?
Sure.
Well, first of all, I want to applaud you for your work with the Bay State Banner. You know, as a student in Boston years ago, one of my research projects, when I was a student at BU in African American Studies, and I did a lot of research on the origins and the life of African American journalists and newspapers, from Freedom's Journal all the way up to Bay State Banner. And running a newspaper, as we know, is a very difficult thing, and it's become even more difficult in the age of technology. But the Banner has survived for all these years. And I remember a tough spot you had in Boston. I don't know if it was 10, maybe it was 20 years ago, because I'm getting up there and the years crunched together. But there was a tough point. You've had many, I'm sure, as a paper, but there was one in which at least the news was reporting that the Banner was on its last leg. You're about to close the doors. And I think Marty Walsh was mayor at the time. And somehow he got involved, and you and so forth, and the Banner got a new life. And I was just wondering, you know, from an economic standpoint, from a survival standpoint, advertising, support, that kind of thing, how did you do that? How did you help an African American newspaper survive?
Well,
Boston?
That's a good question. That's a great question. And it survived because the will of the founders and the people who worked here. There are periods of time we had to work for free, and I can tell you, at no time have we ever benefited from the welfare of the Black community to survive. Never sufficient financial support, and as a matter of fact, one of the things that we did that was a little unusual is that in the old days, during World War II, they had the Black papers did very well, but they would sell the papers and people would reach in and buy them. Of course, in those days, you spend a nickel or a dime for a paper. That's a lot, but what we did finally is we said, look, it's more important for us, because we have a small community, to maintain circulation. So what we'll do is we'll do what Black people like. Freebie. That's what they like. Freebie. And so that's the way we did it is that the Banner is free. And now, why did I do that? Because that was the only way that I could interest enough advertisers to say we were worth any attention. Right now, for instance, I'm looking at some data now. The Banner, we have 40% penetration in our market. The Amsterdam News has 1% penetration in their market. The only other paper that has reasonable penetration is the Philadelphia Tribune. But you look at the Afro-American in Baltimore or Washington, D.C., they might as well close down as far as their paper being a reasonable, an effective communications medium for advertisers. It's hard to do, but you want me to tell you one thing is that I have a hard time understanding us. I mean, you know, I worked for a long time to try to make people understand the importance of anybody who doesn't understand the importance of the media now, when you can have somebody like Trump, who is totally incompetent and is such a liar and a person you normally wouldn't want to see in the president's spot, go forward. How did he do it? Media attention. So what do? We back away from it. There we go. And that's what I'm talking about. We have to start thinking about strategizing and how to win. And it's very disturbing to me to look at people who really, there's something, we're not driven by winning. And I understand why, because we have lost so much over the years. To try, have you ever played any sports? You know, if you go and train for a game or and then you lose, that's worse than even not trying. You know, you understand what I mean?
Mhm.
And so when it comes down to being really committed, that's one of the things I was telling you before. I think that we lost some of our fight over the years. And you know, when you say that, people think, oh well, get Melvin Miller out of here. He's so critical. And I understand, but you know, one of the things, I'm a journalist, and you'll never get me to stand up and tell you a lie. I tell you what I think. And if I think that I shouldn't tell you, I don't. You have no idea how many things I've had to bite my lips on, putting out the banner rather than to cause us embarrassment. And I'll tell you one place that's interesting is that over 57 years of the banner, you'll find hardly any stories about Black crime. And some people criticize me. I said, oh, no, man. I don't want to take the news away from the Globe and the Herald. They love that. Let them, I said, we don't need another paper to publish Black negativity. We don't need that. And anybody wants to say, well, you know, you got to tell both. I said, no, you don't. You have to make sure if there's a flow of information in a community, that's all that's necessary. It's not necessary for everybody to be able to participate in the same flow. These are hard decisions. It's a hell of a question you asked. See what you started? There's really much more to it than you think.
Yeah.
But I'm gonna tell you something else, that we got to stop this bull crap. The reason we survived was because of my white friends. I can only point to one or two Blacks who were not on the payroll, who made survival possible. So let's not, you know, I mean, every culture is flawed by definition. And so every culture, you have to try to improve it. And, you know, I mean, I don't know how on earth the people in the white community can talk about white supremacy when they have been taken in by the biggest scam in history. And over the years, and they think it's wonderful. It's a huge scam. Show me where people, working class people, have really benefited from these ultra conservatives.
Yeah. Mel, you know, you have given us much to think about, and certainly much to continue this conversation with. I'm going to ask, though, at this moment, you know, because the time is drawing nigh, and I'm catching a plane about to go up to Boston, so I'll be up in Boston.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So, but does anyone have any questions that they'd like to ask Mel? If not, we can certainly continue this at a future point. I know between yourself and Dr. Harris Gibson here, who's here, and certainly Paul, others, there is a wealth of information that certainly needs to be, shared and learned and heard by all. And so, and our forum is just one step in that direction, trying to connect the spokes on the wheel of slavery. And,
Okay.
so we're going to draw this kind of to a conclusion, now, but I do want to thank you. And I want to thank everyone who's here this morning. Certainly, Elizabeth, it's good to see you. And it's good to see Gerald Thaxton and, Emily and Shirley Eustace House, Kate. And Christian. I'll be in Boston, of course, Paula and Sister Jones. Good to see you. And
Well, good.
we have to connect. So, hey, can you send me your email? Okay. And Paula, always a pleasure. We'll see you tomorrow. Yeah, okay. Christian, we'll see you this week. Elizabeth, hopefully. So Emily, thank you always. And Amy, a wonderful, and Joey Wheeler. Oh, yes. And there's Joey Wheeler. That's Mel's cousin. So, but thank you all. And
Thank you, everyone.
yeah, we have no. We just say
Good luck. Good luck.
thank you very much, sir. Thank you, and thank you for your support and continue the friendship over all these years. Next month we have the Museum of Massachusetts Historical Society and Gavin Cleepsby. I saw her on here, and then Egypt. We have somebody from Virginia Commonwealth who is going to speak, who I named.
Yeah, Brooke Newman, she'll be speaking in April.
Okay.
And then we have Aja Jones, the archaeologist from Harvard, that will be speaking.
Okay, so we have, over the next, continued several months, and we have some very compelling and interesting speakers, and we certainly would look forward to hearing, maybe more from yourself in the future, Mel, and continued luck and with the banner and all that you're doing. And thank you for today. And outstanding, and a lot of information was shared. So I guess if no one has any other questions, I'm gonna say I wish you all well. Go to our website, Slave Legacy History Coalition.org, please. It's been my in-house IT person here, my daughter, who does a lot. We just revised it and updated it. And also, thank you again for your support. And we look forward to seeing everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
I wish
Thank
you
you.
all well. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.